Right, let's get started with our Smighty Purse. It's got a twist lock on the front, or a turn lock, whichever you want to call it. I guess it depends on the style of lock you're going to use. And then inside we've got our zipper pocket on the front, and then we've got, this is my working purse at the moment, so I have got my cards in there. So we've got a compartment at the back, I've got my receipts in there, we've got card slots, and then we've got a compartment in the middle as well. So we're going to go through. There are steps within the instructions to explain how to make it a little bit more beginner friendly for when you're turning. And basically the way to do that, I'm going to explain as we go through, but the way to do that is to omit this middle panel. So you're going to still have two compartments, the card slots, you're just not going to have that middle one. That's going to make it a bit easier to turn it through. So we're going to get started. So there's our Smighty, I'll pop that up there. So I've prepped up all my pieces. I've got my zipper pull on my tape. That's really important so you don't forget to do it. I've seen so many times people forget, and that's really unfortunate when that happens. The other thing I like to do is to put clips on the end so that you can't pull your you can't take your pull off of the zip tape. And also I like to, so this is obviously the closed end up here. And then what I like to do is I like to feed the teeth in to close it. Now I'm not going to do it this time on camera because this zipper was a little bit tricky, and I know that it's going to be tricky to do it on camera, but what you can do is you can feed the teeth, you can sort of push the teeth in together so that it feeds in together and is closed at the one end. So that is what I like to do that's going to make it easier for when we're putting it in. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we are going to start off, as it explains in the pattern, we need to attach all of our interfacing. So I just wanted to show you what I've done with that. I've kept my pattern pieces here. So what I've done is, this is pocket section pattern piece 5. So we've got our pocket section, which is the interfacing, pattern piece 5, and I've put that on. So I've added that interfacing to the back of, I think it's pattern piece 1, yes, pattern piece 1, and you want to center that because basically pattern piece 5 doesn't have the seam allowance and it has that zipper part cut out ready for you. It's slightly bigger than the actual zipper hole, so that's worth noting as well. So you want to prep that, put that to one side. The other thing is as well, you want to prep your inner pocket sections. Now I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the interfacing as mentioned on the pattern. It mentions for you to have stiff interfacing. Now you've got options here. If you use Decaville Light, which is what I've used here, if you use Decaville Light for all your stiff interfacing, it's going to get a bit tricky when we're turning it out. Again, like I said, you can omit that middle compartment, that middle section, to make it a bit easier. To make it even easier still, you can use double layer of woven interfacing instead of Decaville Light. So what I've actually done is I've mixed it up a bit. So I know, so this one has got Decaville Light throughout. And I know that I want this top flap to be really quite sturdy. I also know I want that front one to be quite sturdy as well. So for that main piece, I have used Decaville Light. And then for the front piece, where we're going to have our zipper, I've used Decaville Light to make it a bit stronger. But not as thick as like a Peltex interfacing or anything like that. So that's worth noting, that you can chop and change to make it A, easier on yourself to turn, and B, easier to sew, and it depends on your level and also what supplies you have, let's face it. So I have added to the back of my pattern pieces, I also got some thread stuck in there, never mind, that's fine. I've added to the back of 2 of my pattern piece 2s, I've added the double woven on top of the regular interfacing that you need to use, which is a non-woven. So I've interfaced it like it says in the cutting chart with the non-woven, and then I've done a double layer of woven within the seam allowance. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. You could use all Decaville Light, or you could use all woven, depending on your preference. And then you want to leave one which has nothing on, well, it doesn't have the stiff interfacing on, it has the non-woven only. Okay, so we're going to start off with our zipper section. So I'm going to pop that to one side, make sure I've got my label on so I don't forget. So we want to take our pattern piece 3, which is our zipper section. So we want to start off with our zipper panel. So we need to lay our piece on top. I'm just going to pop that one on. Okay, so we need to measure down from the top, and it should be, our pattern piece 3 should be 1 centimetre down from the top. I'm afraid this tape measure is a little bit old, it's been around a while, and then that needs to be centred. Now an easy way that I like to centre things is do a little crease with my nail in the fabric, and I'm going to do the same on the other one. And you can't see, but I can see where that middle is if I look closely. Okay, so that's lined up, and then it's a centimetre down. My pins. Okay, so I'm pinning that in place through the layers. It doesn't matter if we make a hole in the Decaville light, and obviously if you're using woven, that's totally fine too. And then I'm going to use my pattern piece 1 with the box cutout, and I'm going to lay that on top, and I'm going to grab a friction pen, which I have here, and I'm just going to mark on my rectangle. You can use a ruler, it's probably a better idea than just eyeballing it like me. Then what we're going to do is we're going to sew around that rectangle. So we don't start at the corner, we start in the middle, and I've got a 2.5 stitch length, and I am using Gutermann all-purpose thread. No, I'm not, I'm using I'm using a mixture. So the white that you'll see me use is Gutermann, and then the blue is Coats Moon. I flick between the two. Often at work they have Coats Moon, and I think the blue I'm using, Dawn, you'll like this, I think it's an Iggle Piggle blue. I have quite a lot of Iggle Piggle blues in my stash. So we're starting in the middle on a 2.5 stitch length, and I've also got a universal 80 needle in, and we're going to start in the middle, and you'll see why. So I'm sewing almost to the end. Okay, then about 1 inch before the end, we're going to turn down the stitch length to, I'm going to do just under 2, 1.9 to be exact. That is because as we get to the end, this is going to give you a sharper box hole, and it means you can make it a bit easier to get to the end of your rectangle. It's going to make it easier for you. You don't have to keep stopping and starting and lifting and all of that business. So I've kept the needle in, lift the foot and turn the work, and again going on along a little way. Hopefully the camera isn't shaking any more. It's fine when you're sewing. Brilliant, thank you, Bridget. Okay, now I'm going to turn it back up to 2.5, and we keep sewing till we're about, I'm just going to move that thread out of the way. I've got a knee lift, so when you see it magically lift and it's like, how did she do that? It's because of that. I'm going to turn it back down from 2.5 to just under 2 till we get to the end. Okay, needle down, lift the foot, turn the work just like we normally do for these things. Keep sewing up to that box corner. See, that time it didn't hit the corner, so I'm going to reverse a smidge by lifting and get it in the right place, because we want it to be as accurate as we can. This is when the knee lift comes into its own. There we go. Turn the work. Take that pin out just in case it gets a bit gnarly. And I'm just going to continue to where we started, and I'm going to do reverse stitch and cut the thread. Ooh, my machine wants to do it. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to cut that thread because we don't want that. Take the pin out. We are going to cut on the inside, so I'm going to draw a rough thing so you can see it. So it's kind of like a V at each end and then a long line in the middle. Do let me know in the comments as well if you've cut out and you're ready to go, or indeed if you're sewing along. Even if you're watching this on replay and you're sewing along, let me know. So now I've got that, I'm going to cut into there. Be careful you don't cut your fingers, obviously. And then we're going to go all the way along, and with any luck, yes. Can you see it has missed the Deckerville? It's a little bit off, I must admit. Not quite as straight as I'd have hoped, but that's okay. That's the joys of live sewing. And then we're going to cut into those V's. Now we want to make sure that we don't go right up to that stitching. We want to be about 1 millimetre shy of that stitching, because obviously we don't want to cut into those threads and those stitches. Okay, so now I've done that, I'm going to then pop that through. This can be a little bit kind of fiddly because you've got a few short bits, so sometimes it doesn't want to quite play the game. So let's see what happens. Just have to keep tweaking it, pushing and pulling, and kind of wiggling the fabric. And if you saw the unicorn tutorial, you're going to know about this because we did the same thing. This is my preferred method really of putting in zippers. So you're probably going to see this a lot and get used to this. So it's all about getting those end corners really nice. Hopefully that's close enough for you to see. And pulling it and pushing it to get it to sit really nicely. Got some extra frayed threads. Easy for you to say. And we're just going to manipulate it. The idea being that really we want, and that is going to be a bit tricky because my sewing did go off as you saw, we don't want any of that, the pocket fabric, to be showing on the top. Now because I did go a little bit crazy at the bottom, it might be a bit tricky, but I'm still going to try my best to fold it under and push it out the way, because like I say, we don't want that edge showing. Okay, so now I need to get my iron and we're going to press that. So we're going to manipulate it so that the pocket piece is showing more on the back. So I'm just pulling that because I stitched it a little bit off. I'm going to push it into the submission and go the right way that I want it to go. It's all about the pressing at this stage. If you get that really nicely pressed, you're going to get it nicely pushed under and how you want it to be. So now we've got our zipper hole. So we're going to get our zipper, going to pop the double-sided tape along that edge. Sometimes the end of the double-sided tape gets a little bit kind of unsticky. And another piece on the other end. This Smighty that I'm making right now is for my daughter, so she chose all the fabrics, and I bought these chocolate frog pulls from America for her Harry Potter bag, and we ended up not using them, so we had one left. So she said, yeah, I want a chocolate frog pull, and I was like, but it doesn't go with the zipper or the twist lock that I've got. She said, I don't care, it's just nice to have it there. Okay, so I'm centering that zipper, trying to get it nice and straight. This is the bit, making sure this is kind of sorted before you sew, is how you get it to lie really nice and straight as possible. You can see it's a little bit off. I'm being quite finicky here, but I just want to show you my process. So I'm going to start off not at the top, because I don't want to get in the way of the zipper pull, and I want to have a little bit more stability when I move that zipper pull back and forth. I'm going to turn my stitch up to 3. Oh, there we go. And make sure that thread is underneath. Always, unless you've done, so often I can't hold the threads, and you'll see when I can't, is when I've done the locking stitch. I can't then hold the threads on the next go. But if I'm starting off with a new thread like this, then I can, and I will hold the threads. Okay, so now I've got loads of clearance, so I'm going to lift that and push that out the way, and now I can kind of make sure that this end is a little bit more in line with the rest of it. So we're going to move on to finishing off the pocket. So what we want to do is we're effectively sewing around the edge of that rectangle. I know that from my needle in this position, which is for me 3 over to the right, I know that I'm a centimetre away from that edge. Still on a 3 stitch length, I'm just going to take that to a 2.5. And I think actually I'm going to start over here, put my zipper pull in the middle. I'm going to take that pin out because that's right in the way. Shouldn't have put it there. And you just want to pull the top bit, which has got the stiff interfacing on, out the way. Hold the threads. And we're going to go backwards. Lift the foot, needle down, and we're nearly at the end. Do my locking stitch. That's the end of our zipper pocket section. So we're going to move on now to the card slots, which if you haven't done before can seem a little bit tricky, but I promise you it's not as tricky as it looks. So this is pattern piece 7. And it's the very long one, and this is for our card slots. Okay, and you are going to need your pattern piece for this. You can measure it if you really want to, but I just find it a lot easier. I'm going to grab the iron again, and basically what you want to do is you want to start from the top. Now you can do this 2 ways. You can either go along and pin or mark on your fabric, or what I like to do is I like to get my pattern piece and imagine that this is my fabric because it's got the lines on. Okay, so you can follow along. So you want to get your pattern piece with the top, and then you want to fold it up on that first line. Now usually when you print it, like I can here, you probably can't see, but I can see where that fold is through from the back. Okay, use my nail. And then we're going to fold it back down. Actually, I'm going to move this out of the way for 1 second. We're going to fold it back down along that next dotted line. And make a crease. The next line is going to go up. And you can use the edges, line up the edges to make sure that it's straight as well. but hopefully you can see through. You can just about see through where that dotted line is. So we've gone up, now next one we're going to go down. Ignore this line, this is just where you have to join the pattern because of the size of the paper that it prints on. Okay, then we're going to go up again. And by doing it with the paper, it means that we can then use that with our fabric as a guide. Folding it back the other way. So you can see we're getting our card slots now. 1, 2, 3. That's why this pattern piece is so incredibly long. So we're almost at the end of our card slots on the pattern piece. Okay, so can you see? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see the way it's going. Now we're going to take our actual fabric, unfold the pattern piece. Now I do need my iron. And we're going to match up that top edge. Hopefully I can do this sitting down because I'm at a kind of a weird angle. Fold that up as we did. Make sure you're putting pressure on it so it stays in the right place, the right angle. And then going to push that fabric up without pushing the pattern piece out of the way. Like I say, you can do notches or marks or pen lines. There's another option, but I just find that this gives you, it's a little bit easier in some ways. Maybe not in others, but in some ways it is. And then you want to press along that line. Okay. Then we're going to push it back again. And we're going to match it up to that fold. Make sure it is matched up. Yeah. And we're going to keep going in the same way. There we go. So I'm going to pull that paper out. And because you've got the interfacing in there, that's going to help. And there we've got our card slots. And that's good, that's not too wonky considering there's lots of lines in there. Not too worried about that. Then what we need to do is we're going to baste along those edges to keep that really nice and secure. To move across to our side pieces, and they are pattern piece 6. And what we're going to do here is we're simply going to place them right sides together, and we're going to sew, oops, get rid of that, and we're going to sew along each edge again with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Again, I think I'm going to start from the bottom just because I really don't want to push that out of the way. If I wasn't using a walking foot, I would definitely pin it, but I am, so I'm not going to. Don't need to hold my threads because I used the knotting function, but I can still hold that top thread. If you can, it's worthwhile doing. Oh, still on a 5 length. I want to turn that down to a 2.5. So we've moved back to here, and then we need to press those pieces open, and that is going to make our card slot section. So you want to top stitch down along the edges. So we'll just do that before we jump ahead to that next bit. And now we're going to move back to where we were just now. So we want to place our other pattern piece 2, was pattern piece 2, wasn't it? Yes, with the stiff interfacing on the top, right sides together, and we're going to sew along that top edge, and it's again 1 centimetre seam allowance or 3/8 of an inch. And then what we're going to do is we're going to open it out. Now, one little tip to get the seam to lie really nice and flat, or to make it lie open, is to first press the seam open, okay? As if you were doing dressmaking, if anyone does dressmaking, as if you were doing that, press the seam open first, and you'll see why. Because then, so I'm going to press that open. I'm going to get what's the end of the iron called? Blade? I think it's the blade of the iron, isn't it? That point of the iron anyway. You want to get that in there and push against that seam. Okay? And then it makes it as neat as it can be for when you're folding it, and we're then going to press it. Okay, so I've pressed that open, and then I'm going to top stitch along that top edge now that it's nice and flat. Okay, so that section is done. We've got our card slots ready to go. A bit tricky for you to see with this fabric, but they're there. And then we need to repeat that with the zipper pocket section that we did earlier. So we want to grab that, get our zipper pocket section, and then we want to take one of our other pieces, which is our other pattern piece 1. Now, when I was cutting them, I ran out of the fabric that I wanted, so I cut out an extra one, where is it, in just a plain white. That's fine, that's just going to go behind that section. So we want to place it right sides together. May have an issue with that pull, so we want to bear that in mind. And we want to sew that along that top edge 1 centimetre, just like we did for the pocket section. And we're going to top stitch along that top edge. But before we do that, because I'm going to have to change my thread over again, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to the middle section, because we have to sew this middle section as well. So we have left 2 pattern piece 2s. We've got one with our stiff interfacing, and we've got one without. So we want to place them right sides together, and we want to sew along that top edge again 1 centimetre from the edge. Okay, now we can take both of these pieces and we're going to top stitch along that top edge about 1/16 of an inch from the edge. Or 1/8 of an inch, I should say. 1/8 of an inch. Sometimes I get my inches a bit mixed up. Our outer section, our pattern piece 8, needs to be attached. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to just quickly put that on. That needs to be on your outer side, so I've gone for Galaxy on my outer side. So you want to attach that on. Let's do that before we sew because I don't want to forget to do that. So we're going to sew around that top half. Then we need to snip into those edges where we stopped, so those notches basically, which is here, and we're going to just make a snip a few millimeters from the edge, but not a millimeter I should say from the stitches, so not right up to it, like this. Then we're going to clip into those curves. So you can either do triangles, cut out triangles, or you can use pinking shears. We also want to snip back so that it's 5mm seam allowance all the way around that top edge. And we're cutting those triangles so that they're at least 1mm from that stitch line. You don't want to cut into those stitches, really important of course, because you're going to make that weak if we do that. Now we've done that, we're going to turn it out the right way. So we're going to push that through. Make some of this move out of the way. So we're going to reach through, grab through, and we're going to pull it out the right way. And we're going to push into those corners. You can use a pokey tool, or you know what, for this I'm just using my finger because I can get in there. And then we're going to press that really nicely. And I'm going to pull those little side bits out because we're going to be wanting to sew up to there in a little bit. So you want to make sure you can get that into that seam allowance nicely. Okay, now we're going to move on to putting in the twist lock. Now if you haven't done this before, it can be a little bit kind of tricky, but again I always think it's worth trying, like got nothing to lose. Now where have I put, oh there's a screwdriver, brilliant. So we've got our 3 parts to it. We've got our keeper, if you like. We've got our, let's call this the male section, and then we've got the female, and then that goes in and then twists like that. Okay, so we want to put our male section on the zipper part, okay? And we're going to measure that. You can either use the pattern piece that it's got the hole in it. I think I will do that. I'm just going to mark a hole through a little bit from the back, so I can see where it is. So we can lay that over our pattern piece. I didn't cut my pattern piece very well, can you see? Got a little slither there. We want to line it up with the bottom, not with the top, because of course we've got rid of some of that seam allowance. And what have I done? I've put my friction pen away, didn't I? A little bit too eagerly. And we're going to mark through and make a dot there. There we go, can make it a bit bigger now. Hopefully that's visible, I'm not sure that it is. It's there. Okay. And then, depending on your lock, a lot of them have got these 2 prongs. So I'm going to line that up and I'm going to make a dent, and hopefully that will make a dent in the interfacing. It helps that I'm on this wall mat. Push through, and then you can't see it, but there's 2 little marks. I'm going to move it up a bit because I think I did it a little bit too low. Then we're going to cut a hole, and we're only cutting a hole through that top piece. Definitely not your zipper pocket, and definitely not the other pattern piece one. Okay, so you can do this with scissors or a knife. make sure you're cutting in the right direction, which is why I quite like to draw it on with a pen. And make sure that that's the right size for it. Yep, that's going to be fine. You also want to make sure, because I think I was about to do it the wrong way. Sometimes they do go each way, but sometimes they have like a top which is nicer. I think that's the nicer side. So you want to make sure that you've got it in the right way, top to bottom, so to speak. I'm going to move that over a smidge, do a little nick so it can move a little bit. I don't want to do it in the wrong place. Is that correct? Yeah, I don't want it to, so you can play around a little bit with the hole. Don't make the holes too big, because obviously you don't want it to wriggle around in there. There, that's good, I think. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly, because actually I haven't tested this and I'm not sure, so I don't want now to be the time that I find out. I'm just going to get rid of those friction pens, because I'm going to put friction pen marks, because I'm going to put fray check on. Now, fray check is super useful. If you don't have it, you could use a clear glue, or you know, you could wing it a little bit and not do anything because you've got the interfacing on the back, but I would recommend that you use something. Oh, sometimes it comes out a bit fast. I think because I've left it upside down, which was a bit silly. Just wait for the pressure to ease off a little bit. And then I'm just going to put 2 little dabs of the fray check on those cuts. Don't want to do too much fray check because sometimes it can kind of show or stain, and that's going to help with any fraying that may occur. I'm not sure that it will, but it's going to help with that. So let me just check I've got it the right way round. Yeah, it's that way. I nearly put it in the wrong way. So you want to put that through, and then you want to put your keeper on. And often, like mine, you see mine's got different holes, so you can choose which hole you want it to go in. I guess it has to go in that one really. Doesn't really match with the in the other way. I think sometimes they're universal. You can turn the prongs whichever way you like, but I like to turn them facing outwards. I find that it's a little bit stronger. So you just want to push that down. It's quite stiff to do that, but you can push that down. One's gone easier than the other, of course. Come on. Then we want to take our outer section and we want to place our good side out, that's the facing out. I'm just going to move that lock out the way so I keep it safe. I hope that didn't... Oh, I thought for a minute that I'd lost one of the screws. That wouldn't be very helpful. We want to place our outer section right side down, and we're going to flip our lining piece bottom up and towards the top. Okay, and then we're going to turn it over so that it's right side up like this. Okay, and then just make sure I'm following along with the instructions the same way, so that if you want to follow along you can do too. Then we're going to place the zipper section right side down, so you want to put that lock down and we're going to place it right side down, okay, on top. Actually, you know what, I'm going to push the lock up towards the top so it's a little bit more out of the way. Okay, so that's right side down on top, and we're going to baste that in place along the lower 3 edges. Okay, so I'm going to make sure, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip the lining piece to that top flap so that it's definitely out the way and I'm not going to sew it. Okay, and then we're going to, I think I'm going to clip that rather than pin it around the edge. And we're going to baste that, like I say. Move that fray check out of the way a minute. So I'm going to go onto a longer stitch. little bit tricky for the testers. A couple of testers found this a little bit confusing. So I have changed the instructions since then, so hopefully it is easier to understand, but I didn't want anyone to get stuck again. So now we have basted those 3 bottom edges. We then want to place our middle pocket section on top. So which was my middle pocket section? It's not the section with the card slots, okay? It's our plain section. This is the bit, if you want to make it easier, that you leave out this middle section. So if you want to make it easier, just don't make this middle section. If you have, then I say go for it and give it a go, because there's no harm in that. So we're going to place that right side down. So which way do I want it up? I want it that way up. I want it so. I should explain my thought process. When you're looking at your Smighty, let's get the one I made before. When you're looking at it, you want to think, so this is your zipper section obviously, which fabric do you want as showing as you're looking at it? Okay, and then you've obviously got your card slots. So that side is the one that you need to face down. Okay, so we come to this. I want, as I'm looking at it, just like I just showed you, it's going to be like that. I want the galaxy to be the next one to see, so I'm placing that right side down. And then what we need to do is we need to clip that in place, and we need to, you'll see, just like I explained earlier to Yesenia, you'll see that this section is a little bit shorter, so you're going to need to pull it to meet that edge. It's the same distance in height though, same width, height, length. Okay, and then we are going to base that in place as well. Just because while we're here, I may as well base that in place. It's going to make it a little bit easier for the next bit. I'm going to change it over to machine. Then what we need to do is we have basted that in place. Then we're going to take our final card slot section, and you want to place that with the card slots right side down. And again, it's a little bit shorter, so we're going to match up as we sew. However, first of all, we're going to pull up that lining of the card slots, and we're going to pull it up and out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to clip that up with that bit, and then we're going to match up those 3 bottom edges. I'm going to pin that in place. Now this is a lot of layers now, so your machine might get a little bit shouty. Then we're going to sew along those 3 bottom edges, and we're going to start just under where that top stitching is, so we're going to catch those layers. So I'm going to catch that seam allowance. See how that seam allowance could be flipped up or it could be flipped down. I'm going to catch that because we want that to stay down, so it's a good time to do that. I'm starting, where's my scissors? I'm starting just where that seam is. That seam is there, coming along here. So I'm starting kind of almost on it, if not just in front. Put my needle down to start. Hopefully I don't need a hump jumper. Let's see how we get on. Gonna go back to start with. And we're going to stop again just where that seam line is. Go back cast off. Now, see, we've still got these top pieces, the lining piece pieces, the 2 lining pieces, clipped up out of the way. We're going to trim those corner edges, and we're going to snip back the seam allowance to 5 millimeters or 3/16 of an inch. Okay, so I'm going to go kind of in and down. So I don't want to cut off the I don't want to lose that cast off stitch, I should say. Okay, so we are nearly there. Now what we want to do is we want to unclip that top edge, and I'm going to fold the lining back down, and then what we want to do, oh dear, what's happened here? Gone a little bit wonky, haven't I? I know what that's happened. I overstitched. I'm just going to snip that a minute, and then what I'm going to do, so if you do the same, that's what you can do. I snipped it, and then what I'm going to do, I'm just pushing it up to meet it, and then I'm going to restitch that bit just a smidge to make it meet again. So that's much better and more in line. Then what we're going to do is we're going to fold this top. So this is our front flap. Okay, we're going to fold it, the 2 points in to meet each other, and then tuck it inside out of the way. Okay, so we don't want to be sewing that. Get it out of the way so we can't see it. Then we're going to take our lining piece. So we've got our 2 lining pieces now. Got these 2 excess flaps. This is all sewn, and we're going to meet it up. Just see if there's any comments. Nope. And we're going to have those meet together at the top. Okay. Pull that up, and we're going to pin or clip that around. And what you want to do is you want to leave a large gap at that top, because that is going to be our turning hole. Okay, so I'm going to put pins in there to remind me, and I want to make sure that's not quite meeting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it go a little bit where it wants to go. Doesn't matter if there's that excess at the bottom, because that can go into a seam allowance. Push that down and out of the way again. I had a lovely costume tutor called Biddy. Bridget was her name, and everyone called her Biddy. And she always used to say, like, doesn't matter what you do, sometimes the gremlins will come and steal a bit. Gremlins, or I can't remember if she said gremlins or fairies, will come and they'll steal a bit, and you'll get a little bit missing. And that's what appears to have happened here. But that's okay. It's all good. Put those pins in place. Remember that we are going to be doing that turning. So we want to keep that gap. I want to make that even bigger. Make sure that that's even. And then we're going to sew from those pins all the way around the edge to join up just where that kind of seam is, Okay, so we're leaving that open, start and stop at these 2 pins. And we're going to once again cut the seam allowance. Nobody told me I didn't leave the turning gap. Classic error. I ignored my pins and I carried on going, didn't I? That's okay, we can unpick. Okay, what I am going to do, because I've done that, is I'm going to reinforce those stitches, because when we're turning, we're going to be putting a bit of stress on there, so I don't want to hurt that area. So now we're going to cut the seam allowance off and clip the corners. Less bulk. And then we want to snip off the corners. Then it's going to be our turning through. So we want to grab inside. This is always fun when you're doing this on a live video. Grab inside and push the whole thing the right way out. There we go. See, we're nearly there now. Then this is our final pocket piece. So we want to stitch that up. So 2 ways you can do it. You can either hand sew it, or I always think no one ever sees this bit. If it's the bottom of a bag, you might want to slip stitch it a bit more, hand slip stitch it, but no one's going to see that. So I'm going to poke those corners out, because even though it's going the wrong way, it's going to help it when we pop it back in the other way. And I'm going to give that a quick press, and then I'm going to sew that up on the machine to close our turning gap. So that's sewn up, and then we're going to pop that inside, and we're nearly there, guys, we're nearly there. Pop that inside, so that's our lining, and then we're going to top stitch around that top flap. And I don't know if you can see, but the foot is really high. I can almost put my finger underneath. So I'm going to see how we get on. We might struggle a little bit. What we might need to do is, what should we do? I think we'll start a little bit further down, maybe. We'll see how we go. Let's not jump ahead. Let's see if we can do it. I might hand crank the first couple of stitches, because I think it's not even wanting to go through at this moment. See how we get on. Yeah, it's not liking it, so I'm going to hand crank the first few stitches. Finally, we're going to put in our turn or twist lock inside. So if you haven't done one of these, it's not too tricky, it's going to be fine. It's just about figuring it out. So you're obviously going to have a hole in your lock that you want to make sure it goes inside. Okay, so what we want to do, there is the marking on the pattern, but I always think it's a bit better to do it in situ, just to make sure that it's in the right place. There might have been a fairy stolen a little bit, like I said before. So what you can do is put the lock so that it's kind of up to the ceiling, and then we're going to push, make sure that's in the middle of the screen, we're going to push against it a little bit to try and make a indentation. See if that will do anything. No, it's not really done anything. Okay, plan B is to put a pin in place. So pin through from the top, and I can kind of see, I'll show you in a sec, where the middle is. Make sure that that's lined up with those edges. No, okay, move it over. Take some time doing this so that it's in the right place, because this is pretty important, this bit. Right, I think we're good. So what I was doing is I was looking at it side on, so that I can make sure that my pin is in the middle of the lock. So now that I've got the middle of the lock going that way for my pin, I then want to make sure that my pin is actually in the middle of the space. So the middle of the space is about there. So mine is a bit close to the edge. I think where I lost that bit at the top, I've now found that that's kind of caught up with me here, but it's going to be fine because the lock's still got space. Can you see? Okay, so make that flat. I'm just going to double check that that's in the middle as well with my tape measure. Where did I put it? There I did. There it is. Make sure that that is the middle. So 16. Yeah, so that is 8. So I'm going to redo that over and then recheck it. See if it's still, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go with that. Make sure that it is in the middle, because otherwise it might look a bit funky. But I know that it's all lined up. Then I'm going to take off the back with my screwdriver. Put those things out of the way. Take off the back with a screwdriver. Make sure you don't lose those screws. Oops. And then that's the back. I'm going to place that on top, and taking my friction pen, we're going to draw around that hole so that it's centre. Okay. Take my pin out so I can get around it. So now we've got that marked on there. Okay, I am then going to cut out that ring. So I'm just doing a double check, triple check that that is in the middle. Yeah, because once it's cut, isn't it? So what do they say? Measure twice, cut once. Okay, so we're going to cut through, and we're going all the way through to the back. All the way through. Just be super careful of your fingers, of course. Make a hole, and then hopefully won't lose my screws. We're going to cut it, and we're going to cut it so that it's just past that hole. Now some turn lock clasps have a little ridge. This one had a little ridge on this, so that the fabric sits inside the ridge, which is a lot nicer actually, I have to say, than this one. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but the metal looks like it goes all the way through. It meets on the other side. Where we are, there we are. So it meets on the other side. So this one doesn't have that. So I'm hoping that it gets a really nice finish still. I've not used this one before. So we're cutting on that line. I'm so going to move those, going to lose those screws. We're cutting like just past that line, and this is a little bit of a kind of keep testing it. These scissors are not the best on these tight curves when it's a big bulky area. And then once we've done that, we can test it and see how we're getting on. Okay, so if I left it like that, you'd be able to see the fabric. Hopefully you can see. You'd be able to see the fabric through there, which is not ideal. So I'm going to keep going a little bit more. And we also need to cut a hole for the screws as well, so that's worth noting too. So I'm going to cut, now I've almost got that shape, I'm going to cut out a little bit on each side to get through for the screws. And I think I might do a small zigzag around that edge. So we're going to then put in our twist lock. And that has finished our Smighty Purse. It's all done. So hopefully that wasn't too scary, and I hope that you're all going to give that a go. Do check, like I say, your own lock when it comes to do that. It's important in case you've lost a little bit like I did, or maybe you've gained a little bit. You never know what's going to happen when we're sewing.